Alberni, Mr. Gord Johns.
Well, thank you for joining us today in Courtenay on the unceded lands of the Comox people. It's a privilege to be joined by the federal NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, my good colleague from North Island Powell River, Rachel Blaney, and the executive director of LUSH Valley, Marito Prado. And we know that families throughout Vancouver Island and across the country are struggling right now as the price of food keeps climbing. Organizations like LUSH Valley here in the Comox Valley are going above and beyond to ensure that people in our communities have the food they need. These groups, with people like Marita leading the way, are filling crucial gaps that are widening as poverty rates rise, and because of their hard work, thousands of students and children are fed. I know I speak for many people when I say that we're grateful for this work, but it's crucial to point out that it should not fall to organizations like LUSH Valley to do this work without proper support from all levels of government. While the BC government has been a meaningful partner in supporting LUSH Valley's programs, the federal government hasn't been doing their share. The Liberals have promised to put in place a school food program. They haven't done that. The families are still waiting for this help. We need the federal government to fill the gap. So today we join together in calling on the Liberal government to finally put in place long overdue programs to make sure that it's easier on families that are struggling to meet the rising costs of inflation. And it's my pleasure to introduce Marita Prado, the Executive Director of LUSH Valley, to speak about the incredible work of her organization and what they're doing for people here in our communities. Thank you, Marita.
Thank you so much, Gord. It's an honor and a real opportunity. At LUSH Valley, we envision a region where healthy local food is at the heart of community well-being. And we do that in three important ways. One, we partner with about 25 local farms to make sure that we're supporting our local food economy. We also provide programs that provide access for people that are dealing with food insecurity through 30 community organization partners so that they have access and ongoing access to healthy local food. And the third thing we do is that we work with community to make sure that community members have the skills and knowledge around food systems through programs like Young Cooks, our community kitchens, and about 13 school gardens. So I want to talk about our partnership with School District 71. Right now we're supporting 300 school district families through our Good Food Box program, which is a program that provides local produce and eggs to our families. We also provide and support salad bar programs and hot meal programs. And specifically, I want to speak to our partnership with Indigenous education. Through Indigenous education, we're providing about 1,000 meals a week through a program called our Healthy Student Meal and Snack Program. That program is unique in that we bring local food into our warehouse. We have volunteers that pack that food. It gets distributed out to about 20 school programs where Indigenous support workers work with students to provide those meals. We know that we're having an impact because we are providing over 25,000 meals a year. And we hear all kinds of stories about students that maybe weren't going to eat their vegetables, but because it's here at school and it's normalized, they're loving it. Little kids that are asking for recipes so they can go home and they can cook with their families at home. And even some students we hear about that wouldn't otherwise go to school, but they know it's a meal program day, so they're going. That said, there's so much need. There continues to be so much need. And that's why we're standing with our organization, the Comox Valley Food Policy Council, that's really pushing wraparound policy to move in the right direction, to ask for the federal government to match the provinces and territories that have supported meal programs and ask them to put in significant funds so that we can provide programming, school food programming in a universal way so that every student has access to a meal across the country. So that's what we're urging our federal government to do, to really match those funds. Thank you.
So much good. Well, that's some good news from Marita. First of all, I want to thank you for being here, Marita, and thank you for the great work you do in the community. I want to thank Gord and Rachel as our local MPs. They are always fighting for people. And I want to point out what Marita touched on, the need. No one in our country should be going hungry. No kid in our country should be going hungry. But the reality is, with the high cost of food, the high cost of groceries, people are going hungry. We're seeing record usage of food banks across the country, here on the island, but everywhere in the province and in the country. Record use of food banks at a time when the CEOs of corporate grocery stores are making record profits. They're making more money than they've ever made. So we've got a choice right now. In this serious crisis, we've got to give people some relief. We've got to take off the pressure on the shoulders of parents and those kids who aren't getting nutritious meals because they just can't afford it. At a time like this, I want to point out that the Liberals have promised to bring this in for years and haven't done so. They've been dragging their feet, stringing people along, and that's wrong. And then recently we had a vote on a national school lunch program, and Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives voted against it. How could they look a kid in the eye who hasn't been getting nutritious meal and say they're going to vote against a school lunch program? How can they look parents in the eyes? Parents who are doing everything they can and are still struggling to put food on the table. How can Pierre Poilievre and Conservatives look them in the eyes and say, we are against your kids getting a school lunch program? Well, we're fighting back. And we're making it very clear. In this upcoming budget, one of our specific demands is that the federal government finally commit to a national school lunch program. We want to make this happen across the country. As Marita said, we want to make this everywhere, in every city, in every community, that every kid can go to school and know that they'll have a healthy lunch. Imagine what that's going to mean for that kid, for that young person, going to school knowing they're going to have one nutritious meal, absolutely guaranteed. Imagine what that's going to mean for a parent who knows that no matter how tough things are and how hard it is to buy groceries, my child is going to have a nutritious meal at school. That's one less thing I have to worry about. That's one less thing I can take off my plate. I don't have to worry about that. That's what we're talking about. Real relief, giving people a break, making sure they can actually focus on the things they need to focus, and kids can focus on their education and participating in school, not wondering about where they're going to get their next meal. That's what we're talking about. So we're making it very clear. In this upcoming budget, we are demanding that the Liberal government bring in funding for a national school lunch program so every kid can get access to a nutritious meal at school. I'm going to do that again in French, and then I look forward to your questions. Remercie le travail de Gord et de Rachel, les deux députés dans ce comté, dans cette région, qui font un travail acharné. Avec ça, on est prêt pour vos questions. With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Okay, we're going to start with questions on site. We'll do one question, one follow-up. Maybe we'll start with Jen FM over here. Do you have one?
Oh, I think that's...
sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, thanks for coming out, just making this announcement today. I think one of the questions I'd think of, it's a big program, how much money would it estimate to cost to bring this sort of stuff to communities, and where would that come from?
So in terms of how we can pay for these type of programs, I think it's a very important question. And one of the things I want folks to know is we really believe in being responsible with the public dollars that we are entrusted with. And we've seen a lot of waste from the Liberal government and Conservative governments before that. We should end that waste. They're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on consultants for work that could be done by the public service. We saw the scandal with ArriveCan. That's tens of millions of dollars going towards an app that no one uses and doesn't even work. There are lots of ways for us to ensure that we can invest in people. We've been calling for a wealth tax at a time when we're seeing large corporations making record profits. And I want to highlight that. It's not just good profits, it's not just high profits. The significant majority of large corporations in our country are making record profits. More money than they've ever made. Not just in grocery stores, but across things that aren't contributing what they actually are owed. Not new taxes, just exactly what they're owed. We're not recovering that revenue, and that's billions of dollars of lost revenue. All these are ways for us to pay for this program. But let's be clear, at a time when there's record use of food banks, when kids are going hungry, it is an imperative. We must make sure we are doing everything we can to keep kids fed, to help parents and families that are struggling with the cost of food. This is a concrete way to do that. We are the only nation in the world, only G7 nation in the world that doesn't have a national school program. a national school lunch program. So I mean, we've got to get up with the times. We've got to make sure we're delivering this. This is so important. And so I fully commit that this is one of the things we're going to be pushing for in the upcoming budget.
Do you have a follow-up?
If I can ask for Marita Prado.
Yeah.
Just a really quick question for you. Obviously, the Comox Valley is a growing community. We're seeing more and more kids. I don't know what sort of stress you guys are necessarily under, but if you want to maybe go into how much stress you're under right now, and also if it keeps going without help, how are you guys feeling about the future here?
Well, we are seeing as a nonprofit that, we're struggling more and more to just fund our operations. And we really do more and more, because it's such a tight economy, depend on, grant funding and opportunities for fee-for-service. As much as possible, these school food programs, we're contributing our own fundraising dollars. But when we see that everybody's struggling, it is harder to fundraise. So we are becoming more and more reliant on these service agreements and opportunities for government funding.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, we'll go to maybe Janet on that. Sorry about that. Or sorry, now it'll be the eco. Thank you.
It's all good. Just to clarify, so you'd be ready to pull the plug on the supply and confidence agreement if this national school lunch program wasn't included in the budget?
So the way we've done it is we haven't negotiated in that way. We've been able to secure pharmacare, we secured dental care, we secured grocery rebate, putting money in people's pockets. The first thing we're doing today was making clear this is what we're asking for in the budget. So we're going to put pressure on the government and make it clear that this is something that we want to see there. And then we'll ramp up that pressure. So right now we're making it clear what we're asking for. We're making it clear that this is our demand. And now the ball's in the Liberal court. We're going to see what they say next. But this is our ask that we're putting forward right now for the budget, and we're putting pressure on the government to deliver. And I challenge the Liberal government. I challenge Justin Trudeau. At a time when people are hurting and they can't afford food, this is a concrete measure. Like I said, we're the only country in all of the G7 nations that doesn't have a national school lunch program. So let's develop this program, let's put the money behind it. We've got partners that are already doing great work, like Marita here in LUSH Valley. Let's make sure that all communities, everywhere in our country, kids can get that meal. Parents don't have to worry about that.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, this would be for Marita. Is there like a wait list or something that you could speak to in terms of just the need?
So yes, we do have actually a wait list for our Good Food Box program. As mentioned, we are providing free subsidized boxes to the families, and that funding comes from School District 71 to reach 300 families. But we have a wait list for the program that we can't currently reach because of funding limitations. A number of our programs do have wait lists, or partners that have typically gotten the service for free but now are needing to pay because of limitations. So definitely we have much more need than we can meet from because of financial barriers.
Just add something if I could. One thing that's really important to remember, what we're calling for today, the provincial government stepped forward. They brought forward a school lunch program that covers 20% of children. 80% of children aren't covered. What we're calling for today is the federal government to be a true partner, to fulfilling the dream, to make sure that no child goes to school and goes to school hungry and leaves school hungry. That's the goal today, to make sure the federal government fills the gap.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do another ask around here. A National Observer, you want?
Yeah, sure. So I do have two questions. The first being the pressure on food banks and food programs and the need for school lunch programs is largely is higher than ever, and a lot of experts argue it's because that in fact poverty relief is real efforts at negating poverty are not in place. But does the NDP have some sort of trajectory or plan in order to deal with the illness rather than the symptom?
We believe that there's a lot of challenges going on, and we need to look at all the solutions. So we don't suggest this is the only solution, but this is an important part of it. We know that one of the reasons why food prices are so high is that corporate greed that a lot of economists are pointing to, that inflation was used as an excuse for a lot of companies to just jack up their prices and rip off people. And that's a big problem. And so we're pushing for solutions around that. I put forward a bill that would crack down on abuse of consumers, that would crack down on things like price gouging and price fixing that's done by large corporations, and really protecting families. So that's one part of the solution. We need to protect people from abuses of those who have way too much power. And we think about the corporate grocery stores in our country, there's 3 CEOs that run the vast majority of grocery stores you go to. So they have a very dominant market share, and they're abusing that dominant market share, and people are hurting because of it. So we're pushing back with legislation that I've introduced recently, that was the first stage was passed, to crack down on that. We also know that we need to tackle areas where people are spending a lot of money out of pocket, and that's why we fought for things like dental care, which is going to save families money, and pharmacare, which is going to save families money. So we're looking at this as an affordability crisis, and we have to look at every solution we can to bring down the cost that families are incurring. And a lot of that is by putting in place ways that take the burden off families. So for people that are paying out of pocket for diabetes medication, by bringing in free diabetes and medical device coverage, that's going to save families, in some cases, thousands of dollars a year. Each of these measures are ways to save people money and ways for us to invest in taking care of each other. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges why we're in this position, and we're looking at multiple solutions.
Do you have a fault? Yeah.
I just wanted to speak to the issue of poverty and stigma-free. So the reason that universal school meal programs are so important for poverty reduction is that when every child has access to a program on a sliding scale, it normalizes a meal program. And that's where we actually see decreases in poverty. When things become normalized and they're sort of treated as normal, that's where we see those decreases that are stigma-free. So this is why it's so important that we're not just targeting the 20%, but we're looking for a universal school meal program.
Do you have a follow-up?
I do. I cover a lot of rural issues. MP Blaney and Johns, of course, have a number of rural and remote communities where food prices are extraordinarily high. It kind of speaks to what you were talking about, making it universal. All kids, we're hoping all kids go to school, so that's one way to reach. But are there any other measures that you're pushing for or planning in order to deal with that real food insecurity across Canada in rural and remote communities?
So this is one program that we're hoping will expand. We want to make sure that it's national, so it covers every kid, every school, everywhere in our country. That includes rural communities and remote communities. So this is something that's going to certainly help out in those communities that are hard hit. We also have been pushing for changes to different programs that work in some of the more northern communities. There's a food program, a subsidy given by the federal government. And we've learned recently that a third of the money that was supposed to go towards making food more affordable in the north, and these are some of the most remote communities, a third of the money was being held by the corporations as profit. And so we've said this is wrong, that should not happen. All the money for a subsidy program, it's called Nutrition North, that Nutrition North program, all of it should go towards making sure people can access a nutritional and affordable food. And so that's another critique that we've raised. And so we're constantly looking for ways to make sure food is more affordable, taking on the corporate greed in grocery stores, protecting consumers, the national school lunch program, as well as looking at ways to improve the existing subsidies that are there so that all the money goes towards making sure people have benefit, not the CEOs of corporations. So these are some of the measures that we're pushing for.
Okay, Black Press, you have a question?
All good, all answered.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Alana, then in Ottawa on the Zoom line.
Sure.
Okay, our first question comes from the Canadian Press. Go ahead, please, Mickey.
Thanks for taking my question. I guess why have a national program and not leave it up to provinces to fund their own food programs?
Well, this is really a partnership. So BC, for example, has started. They've taken that really bold step to cover students, but with their investments, it doesn't cover all students. So really what we want to do is set aside funding to support initiatives to cover every kid in every province and every territory. We are the only, I mentioned this before, and it's important to note, we are the only G7 nation that doesn't have national funding for a school lunch program. So other countries have figured it out. It makes sense. We've also heard from economists, this is a non-inflationary way to contribute towards lessening the burden on families. I want to make sure that every kid in our country goes to school and is guaranteed a nutritious meal. that would make a big difference in the lives of parents. I think about the pressure on the shoulders of parents that are trying to put food on the table and on top of that have to figure out a way to feed their kids when they go to school. If a parent would have that relief to know that every kid that goes to that school is going to get a good nutritious meal, it's going to take a lot of burden off their shoulders. It's something we absolutely can do, and it's something that other countries have done, and we are going to force the government to do this in this next budget for Canadians. Did you have a
Thank
follow-up,
you.
Vicky?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I just, I don't know how to unmute. I guess, how confident are you that this is going to be in the next federal budget? I just recall last year you were calling for the GST rebate weeks before the federal budget came out, and it ended up being in the federal budget. So obviously you've had talks with the Liberal government on this. How confident that you will see something like this in the budget that's coming up?
Well, on this particular file, we don't know where the Liberals are going to go because they actually promised it back in 2019. So 5 years later, or we're in 2024 now, we still don't have it. So I don't think they're going to do it unless we push them. On the GST rebate, now known as the grocery rebate, when we first proposed this idea, the Liberals came out and said no. The Conservatives came out and said no right away. So they were opposed to it. And we didn't know if they were going to support it. We kept on pushing though. We did not back down. We did not give up. So in this case, I don't know where the Liberals are going to go. They have signaled in the past interest, but they did that with Pharmacare for 30 years and never did it until we forced them to do it. So again, this is something I believe in. I want to point out though, this is something that Canadians believe in. Canadians are asked this question, and I believe it was 3 out of 4 Canadians, so 75% of Canadians agreed that we should have a national school lunch program. And that makes it even all the more offensive that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives voted against a bill or a vote on this idea of having a school lunch program. They voted against it. Just last year, at the end of the year in December 2023, they voted against it. That shows you who they are and who they're standing for. They're not standing up for families. They don't want a school lunch program, but we are fighting for you. We're fighting to make sure that kids have access to a nutritious meal at school. We believe this is important. So we've made this really clear to the Liberals now. We're making that announcement today, that we are demanding this in the budget, and we're going to keep the pressure up. I hope great folks like Marita and her organization and other advocates that have been pushing for this will make their voices even louder. That's why we wanted Marita here today, because we wanted folks to hear the needs are there and that communities and organizations want to do this work, but don't have the funding to cover every student. And that's why we're pushing for this.
Okay, our next question comes from Valérie Ganache avec Radio-Canada.
Je pense que peut-être vous êtes sur Soudan.
Voilà, vous m'entendez?
Oui, merci.
Mr. Singh. So, yeah, of course, a national school lunch program, not explicitly spelled out in supply and confidence agreement, but there's a provision there to work together on other priorities. Would this, if the program isn't included in the upcoming budget, do you think it would have any impact on confidence votes?
Thanks for the question, and you're right, it's not specifically spelled out in what we negotiated for, but we were able to, we made it really clear that what we negotiated was a floor, not a ceiling. And there's been many examples where we fought for and been able to secure more for people. Even with Pharmacare, what we negotiated was a legal framework. What we got was free birth control for every Canadian that needs it, free diabetes and medical devices for everyone in our country, in a universal single-payer program. So we made that happen. And we were able to get a grocery rebate in place that was also not something we negotiated, but we fought for and we made happen. So we will continue to push for this. We believe it's very important. And we're gonna start at this phase with putting it out there that this is what we want. And now we're gonna wrap up the pressure. We hope to see other advocates add their voices to say, yes, this is the time to make it happen. We're already hearing from someone like Marita, who's added her voice, calling on the federal government to do this. So we're gonna ramp up the pressure, and we hope that the Liberal government understands that for parents, for kids, this is the right thing to do, and that they don't take the position of the Conservatives who voted against a national school lunch program, who voted against kids getting free lunches, who voted against parents having the confidence to know that their kids would be okay if they go to school. I want the government to understand that this is our demand, we're pushing for it, we want to see it happen.
Great, thank you. And just to shift gears here as well, Dominic LeBlanc was out this morning saying they're going to be launching consultations on bringing forward amendments to modernize and change the Emergencies Act. What's the NDP position on this? Does the Emergencies Act legislation need to be modified through amendment?
Oh, absolutely. We from the beginning said that we need to be very open to any recommendations and improve the legislation based on the recommendations we receive. We supported the procedure that called for a public inquiry, and we supported the findings of the public inquiry. And what we're disappointed in is the fact that Liberals haven't released a timeline or clear steps they're going to take to put in place those recommendations. We should be listening to the work of the Rule of Commission. That's the whole point of having the commission. For too long, we've seen the Liberals get a report and a recommendation and then shelve it, allow it to collect dust, and never put in place those recommendations. That's wrong. We need to actually follow through on what's been recommended. We know that even implementing the Emergencies Act itself was a recognition of the failure of Rachel and to Gord. Gord's riding right now. Thanks for the great work you're all doing. Appreciate it. Merci.